The morning of March 18th, 29 dawned like any other for Claudia Lawrence. The 35-year-old chef was well known for her diligent work ethic and a meticulous daily routine. Employed at the University of York's Goodricke College kitchen, Claudia typically started her early morning shifts without fail, ready to prepare breakfast for students and staff. Her day began with a normal walk home after finishing her shift the previous evening. Around 6 o'clock, Claudia was spotted by a colleague while heading back to her modest terraced house on Heworth Road. They exchanged pleasantries, and by all accounts, Claudia seemed her usual self, calm, cheerful, and entirely at ease. She even made plans with a friend to meet for dinner the following evening. Once home, Claudia likely settled into her regular evening routine. She was known to enjoy winding down with television or chatting on the phone with close friends. That night, she reportedly sent a few text messages before heading to bed, as she always did, knowing her alarm would ring early for her next shift. But when the morning of March 19th arrived, Claudia's world and the lives of everyone who cared about her was about to take a chilling turn. She failed to show up for her 5 a.m. shift. This was entirely out of character for Claudia, whose punctuality was practically a signature trait. When her absence was noticed, her supervisor and colleagues attempted to contact her. Calls went unanswered and texts remained unseen. At first, they assumed there had been some minor delay, a late alarm, perhaps, or an unexpected illness. But as the minutes stretched into hours, concern quickly grew. By the end of the day, Claudia's usual reliability had vanished, leaving only an ominous silence. This marked the beginning of one of the United Kingdom's most puzzling mysteries. As the hours ticked by on March 19th, Claudia Lawrence's absence weighed heavily on those who knew her best. Her colleagues, puzzled by her failure to appear for her early morning shift, made repeated attempts to contact her. Calls to her mobile phone went straight to voicemail, and text messages remained unread. For a woman known for her dependability, this behavior was entirely out of character. Claudia's close friends grew increasingly anxious. Throughout the day, they tried to rationalize her silence. Perhaps she was feeling unwell or had forgotten to charge her phone. But as the day wore on with no word from Claudia, worry began to replace rational thought. Her father, Peter Lawrence, who had a close and loving relationship with his daughter, sensed that something was wrong. Claudia often kept him updated about her life, and the silence from her end was alarming. When repeated calls to her mobile phone went unanswered and the line eventually appeared to be switched off, Peter decided to take action. By that evening, Peter contacted the police, reporting his daughter as missing. His voice carried the urgency of a parent who instinctively knew something was terribly wrong. At first, the authorities approached the situation cautiously. A single day of silence wasn't entirely uncommon for adults who might choose to take a break from their routines or simply have an off day. But for Peter, this was no simple oversight. Claudia's reliability and habitual nature made her sudden disappearance all the more suspicious. As investigators began their initial checks, they quickly realized there were no signs of Claudia contacting anyone after her last text messages the previous evening. What had started as mild concern among friends and family was rapidly morphing into something far darker. With each unanswered call and each passing hour, the dread grew deeper. The seemingly ordinary life of Claudia Lawrence was about to be pulled into the spotlight, and what lay beneath the surface hinted at a story far more complicated and far more dangerous than anyone could have imagined. The last confirmed sighting of Claudia Lawrence was captured on CCTV footage on the evening of March 18, 2009. The footage, taken near her route home from work, showed Claudia walking along Melrose Gate in the direction of her house on Heworth Road. In the grainy black and white video, Claudia appeared completely at ease. Her stride was steady, her demeanor unremarkable. There were no signs of hesitation or unease in her body language, no glances over her shoulder or hurried steps that might indicate she felt threatened. To any observer, it would seem like just another ordinary evening walk after a long day at work. This brief footage became a crucial piece of evidence in the investigation. Investigators meticulously analyzed the recording, hoping for any clue that could shed light on her movements. Was she being followed? Did anyone approach her along the way? But the footage revealed no such details. Claudia was alone, and her walk home appeared routine. Police interviewed neighbors and residents in the area, asking if they had seen or heard anything unusual that evening. A few neighbors recalled spotting Claudia returning home, but none reported anything amiss. She likely entered her house around 6:30 p.m., closed the door behind her, and disappeared into the night. The trail after this point turned cold, hauntingly so. There was no CCTV footage beyond her front door and no evidence of any visitors entering or leaving her home. The lack of any visible disturbance suggested Claudia had either left voluntarily or was lured out later that night. But the question remained, by whom? Piecing together the hours after this sighting proved to be one of the investigation's most daunting tasks. Claudia's phone records indicated she sent a few texts that evening, and her mobile phone signal remained active until shortly after midnight. What happened between those last texts and the next morning when she failed to show up for work? The last glimpse of Claudia on CCTV became a haunting reminder of how quickly the ordinary can turn into the unthinkable. For investigators, it was a fleeting moment frozen in time, a moment that held the promise of answers, but ultimately led only to more questions. Who, if anyone, was waiting for Claudia that night? And how did she vanish so completely from the quiet streets of York? The 18th of March marked the last confirmed sighting of Claudia Lawrence, but as the hours unraveled, subtle and eerie details began to emerge. After being spotted walking home from work around 6 o'clock, Claudia seemed to settle into her usual evening routine. Records show that she exchanged several text messages with friends later that night, her tone casual and relaxed. One text stood out, a message to a close friend confirming plans to meet for dinner the following evening. It was a small but important detail, a marker of Claudia's intent to carry on with life as usual. Nothing in her messages suggested she was worried, upset, or anticipating anything out of the ordinary. But something did happen that night, something no one has been able to fully explain. Investigators believe Claudia stayed home after sending her final texts. There were no signs of forced entry, no reported disturbances, and no witnesses to suggest anything unusual had occurred at her residence. Then, just after midnight, Claudia's mobile phone went silent. The signal disappeared, as if the phone had been switched off or destroyed. This small but critical gap in the timeline sent chills through investigators. Was this the moment Claudia was taken? Or was it a deliberate act, perhaps by Claudia herself, to go off the grid? Adding to the mystery, Claudia didn't call or message anyone after midnight, an uncharacteristic break from her usual patterns. She was known to chat with friends late into the night, or at least keep her phone active, yet by the morning of March 19th, her connection to the world had vanished entirely. The absence of a clear timeline became one of the most confounding elements of the case. How could a woman with such a predictable routine simply disappear without a trace? The mundane events of March 18th, the walk home, the texts, the plans for dinner were now shrouded in an ominous fog of uncertainty. For her family, the realization was devastating. Claudia had gone about her day as though everything was perfectly normal, yet something sinister had clearly interrupted her life. The 18-hour gap between her last texts and her missed shift the next morning would become a focal point of the investigation, a void filled with speculation, theories, and unanswered questions. What happened after Claudia's phone signal vanished that night? Was she lured out of her home? Did someone force their way in under the cover of darkness? Or could the answer be hidden in plain sight, somewhere in the quiet streets of Heworth Road? Each possibility brought investigators closer to the chilling truth. Claudia's life had been overtaken by something far beyond her control. The days following Claudia Lawrence's disappearance brought mounting tension as the police launched a full-scale investigation. Detectives began at the source, her small, unassuming house on Heworth Road. The front door was locked, and there were no signs of forced entry. Inside, the scene was eerily ordinary. Her handbag sat where she'd left it, her passport remained untouched, and her bank cards were still in their usual spot. Even her bed was neatly made, suggesting that Claudia hadn't prepared for an unexpected journey or overnight stay. The absence of any physical disturbance made her disappearance all the more perplexing. It was as if Claudia had simply stepped out, fully intending to return, but she didn't. Expanding their search beyond the home, police scoured the streets of York and the surrounding countryside. Officers knocked on doors, combed through CCTV footage, and made public appeals for any information. Divers searched local waterways, while trained dogs explored wooded areas, hoping to uncover a lead. But the days turned into weeks, and no trace of Claudia surfaced. Her mobile phone and keys were missing, an unsettling detail that hinted at her departure being more deliberate than accidental. But why would she leave behind her handbag, her lifeline to her daily routines, and her wallet? The contradiction left investigators chasing shadows, haunted by the growing realization that Claudia may not have left on her own. As the search continued, her family's heartbreak became public. Peter Lawrence, her father, made emotional appeals on television, urging anyone with information to come forward. Claudia would never just vanish without letting us know, he insisted. His plea captured the attention of a nation, but the silence surrounding her case remained deafening. As investigators delved deeper into Claudia's life, they began uncovering a web of secrets that cast a new light on her disappearance. Friends described Claudia as outgoing and vivacious, someone who could brighten a room with her presence. But beneath her cheerful demeanor, there were layers she had kept hidden even from those closest to her. It soon emerged that Claudia had been involved in multiple relationships, some of which were with married men. This revelation sent shockwaves through her close-knit family, who had been unaware of this side of her life. Her father, in particular, struggled with the implications, unable to reconcile the Claudia he knew with these discoveries. The police began to question whether one of these relationships could have taken a dangerous turn. Was she threatened by a jealous spouse? Did one of her romantic connections harbor darker intentions? The possibilities were unsettling, but they added complexity to an already baffling case. These revelations also led to whispers within the community. Friends and acquaintances were hesitant to share what they knew, and some even distanced themselves from the investigation altogether. The atmosphere of suspicion deepened as police tried to untangle the threads of Claudia's personal life, looking for a clue that might explain her sudden disappearance. What emerged was a portrait of a woman who lived a more complex life than most had realized. To some, these details hinted at a potential motive. To others, they were irrelevant distractions. But for the investigators, they were vital pieces of a puzzle that had yet to reveal its final, chilling image. Claudia's secrets turned her case into more than just a missing person investigation. They made it a labyrinth of relationships, motives, and unanswered questions. For detectives, every uncovered detail was both a step forward and a stark reminder of how much they still didn't know. As days turned into weeks, the absence of concrete evidence forced investigators to speculate. Theories began to swirl around Claudia Lawrence's disappearance, each one as chilling as the next. Was she targeted by someone from her past? Her relationships, especially the ones shrouded in secrecy, drew intense scrutiny. Could a jealous lover have sought revenge, or perhaps a betrayed spouse decided to confront Claudia in a moment of fury? Detectives combed through her phone records and interviewed those who had known her intimately. While a few leads emerged, they lacked the depth to connect anyone definitively to her disappearance. The possibility of a spurned acquaintance also hung over the case. Claudia was sociable, making her well liked, but also potentially vulnerable to someone who might have misinterpreted her friendliness. Investigators delved into her social circle, looking for anyone with a motive or erratic behavior, but no one stood out as a clear suspect. Then there was the unsettling prospect of a stalker. Claudia had never mentioned being followed or harassed, but could someone have been watching her from the shadows, learning her routines, and waiting for the perfect moment to strike? The idea sent chills down the spines of her family and friends. Each theory seemed plausible in its own way, but they all shared one glaring flaw. None brought detectives any closer to the truth. Every avenue led to a frustrating dead end, leaving investigators grappling with the harsh reality that the person behind Claudia's disappearance might be far more elusive than they had anticipated. Despite their relentless efforts, investigators faced an unsettling fact. There was no physical evidence of foul play. Claudia's home was untouched, no signs of a struggle, no broken locks, no blood. It was as if she had simply stepped out and vanished into thin air. Even outside her home, the trail was alarmingly cold. No DNA, no clothing, no belongings turned up in the surrounding area. The forensic evidence was practically non-existent, forcing detectives to rely on witness statements and circumstantial clues, which grew more sparse by the day. This lack of evidence raised haunting questions. If Claudia had been abducted, how had the perpetrator managed to do so without leaving behind even a trace? Was it possible that she had left willingly, only to meet with danger later? Or had someone lured her out of her house under false pretenses? Adding to the enigma was the timing. The small window between Claudia's last text messages around 9 p.m. and the disappearance of her phone signal just after midnight seemed to hold the key to the case. Yet, despite extensive efforts to reconstruct those critical hours, the picture remained maddeningly incomplete. The deepening mystery cast a shadow over Heworth Road and the quiet streets of York. Claudia's friends, family, and colleagues were left grappling with an unbearable truth. The woman they knew and loved had simply disappeared, leaving behind no explanation and no clues. The case's eerie lack of evidence transformed it into one of the United Kingdom's most haunting unsolved mysteries. For detectives, it was a puzzle with far too many missing pieces, a puzzle they feared might never be solved. In their pursuit of answers, detectives turned their attention to Claudia Lawrence's phone records. Mobile devices often leave behind digital breadcrumbs, and in a case with so few physical clues, her phone was one of the most promising pieces of evidence. The records revealed a flurry of activity in the days leading up to her disappearance. Claudia had exchanged text messages and phone calls with several friends and acquaintances, none of which seemed out of the ordinary. The conversations were lighthearted and routine, with no apparent indication of distress or conflict. However, investigators noted one curious detail. A number of these interactions were with people her family and closest friends did not recognize. Claudia's social network appeared to extend beyond what was widely known, raising questions about who she might have trusted or perhaps feared in her final days. Despite their hopes, the phone records offered no direct leads. Whoever was involved in Claudia's disappearance, if anyone, had either meticulously covered their tracks or simply never used their own device to contact her. The phone signal's abrupt disappearance after midnight on March 19th added another layer of frustration. Had her phone been deliberately switched off, destroyed, or had the perpetrator taken it to avoid detection? The lack of conclusive evidence left investigators at a standstill. Claudia's phone, a device that so often connects people to answers, yielded nothing but dead ends, reinforcing the possibility that her disappearance might have been a random act of fate orchestrated with chilling precision. Over the years, Claudia Lawrence's case saw a series of arrests, each briefly reigniting hope that the mystery might finally be solved. But every lead brought only disappointment. In 2010, a man was arrested on suspicion of Claudia's murder. The news sent shockwaves through the community, and for a brief moment, her family dared to believe justice was within reach. However, the evidence against the suspect was circumstantial at best, and he was released without charge. In the years that followed, more arrests followed a similar pattern. Individuals were questioned, homes were searched, and forensic teams scoured properties linked to potential suspects. The media reported on these developments with fervor, each new headline fueling public speculation. Yet, time and again, the investigations hit a wall. None of the suspects could be definitively tied to Claudia's disappearance. One of the more troubling aspects of the case was the lack of clarity surrounding the motives of those arrested. Some were connected to Claudia through her social circle, while others appeared to have only a tenuous link to her. In each instance, the absence of hard evidence made it impossible to move forward with charges. For Claudia's family, the repeated arrests and subsequent releases were a cruel cycle of hope and heartbreak. The police faced mounting criticism for their inability to secure a conviction, but the truth was as elusive as ever. The arrests only deepened the enigma surrounding Claudia's fate. Were the police simply circling the wrong individuals, or was the person responsible for her disappearance someone entirely off their radar? Each failed lead underscored the chilling possibility that the truth might remain forever out of reach. Amid the growing mystery surrounding Claudia Lawrence's disappearance, one voice remained unwavering in its pursuit of justice: Peter Lawrence, her father. From the moment Claudia was reported missing, Peter became the face of the campaign to find her. His love for his daughter fueled his relentless fight to keep her story alive, even as leads dwindled and the case grew colder. Peter's dedication went beyond public appeals and interviews. In the years following Claudia's disappearance, he spearheaded the campaign for a legal reform that would eventually become known as Claudia's Law. Officially enacted in 2019, the law allows families of missing people to manage their affairs in their absence. For families like Peter's, this was a lifeline and opportunity to settle financial and legal matters that otherwise remained frozen in limbo. The success of Claudia's Law was a testament to Peter's determination. It provided hope and practical solutions for families of the missing, but it also carried a bittersweet weight. While it helped countless others, the law could not bring Peter any closer to finding his own daughter. Despite the passage of time, Peter's resolve never wavered. His tireless efforts were a reminder of a father's boundless love and the unrelenting need for answers. Yet, for all his work, the truth about Claudia's fate remained just out of reach. As investigators continued to search for answers, they turned their attention to Claudia's social circle. Friends and acquaintances who had once shared her laughter and secrets now found themselves under the scrutinizing gaze of the police. Initially, these interviews seemed routine. Friends described Claudia as kind, outgoing, and fiercely independent. But as the investigation deepened, inconsistencies began to emerge. Some friends appeared hesitant to speak openly, while others seemed to hold back critical details. The reluctance raised troubling questions. Were they protecting themselves, someone else, or did they genuinely know nothing? The tight-knit group of people around Claudia suddenly felt less like a network of allies and more like a web of potential suspects. One theory posited that someone close to Claudia might have been involved in her disappearance, perhaps an acquaintance she trusted or a friend who had a hidden motive. investigators pressed harder, revisiting old interviews and examining social dynamics for signs of tension or conflict. The unease surrounding Claudia's friends was amplified by whispers within the community. Rumors swirled that some of her relationships may have been more complicated than initially revealed. Could jealousy, betrayal, or even fear have played a role in her vanishing? For detectives, this line of inquiry was both promising and deeply frustrating. The answers they sought seemed tantalizingly close, yet maddeningly elusive. And for Claudia's family, the growing suspicion among her inner circle was an agonizing reminder that the truth might lie uncomfortably close to home. As the days turned into weeks, Claudia Lawrence's disappearance grew into a national obsession. Her story captivated the public, dominating headlines and sparking debates on television and radio. News outlets described her as the vanished chef, a label that underscored the eerie ordinariness of her life before it was upended. True crime podcasts and documentaries dedicated episodes to dissecting her case. From speculations about her secret relationships to theories involving potential predators, every aspect of Claudia's life became a subject of public scrutiny. For her family, the attention was a double-edged sword. It kept Claudia's name alive, but also led to invasive and sometimes hurtful speculation. Even psychic mediums weighed in, claiming to sense her presence or offering vague descriptions of possible locations. These assertions, while dismissed by investigators, only fueled public curiosity and gave rise to countless amateur sleuths who pored over every detail of the case. Despite the unrelenting coverage, the investigation remained at a frustrating standstill. The media spotlight illuminated Claudia's story but cast no light on the truth. Every new theory seemed to lead back to the same chilling reality. Claudia had vanished without a trace, and no one knew how or why. Among the many twists and turns of Claudia Lawrence's case, one of the more controversial developments came from alleged sightings at a local pub. Witnesses claimed to have seen Claudia at a nearby establishment on the evening of March 18th, the night she disappeared. According to these accounts, Claudia had been accompanied by a mysterious man. Some described him as tall and dark-haired, others as stocky and middle-aged. The inconsistencies in the descriptions frustrated investigators, making it nearly impossible to verify the sighting. The pub, a popular spot for locals, had no functioning CCTV cameras that night, leaving detectives reliant solely on witness testimonies. The timing of the sighting raised eyebrows. It reportedly occurred after Claudia was last seen walking home from work. Could she have gone back out that evening? And if so, who was this man, and what role, if any, did he play in her disappearance? The pub allegations sparked a wave of speculation. Some believed the man could have been a casual acquaintance or a romantic partner, while others feared he might have been a predator who targeted Claudia. But with no concrete evidence to support these claims, the story remained just that, an allegation, hanging ominously over the case. For Claudia's family, the reports added another layer of agony. If the sighting was real, it meant Claudia might have left her home willingly that night, a detail that could change the entire trajectory of the investigation. But without clear proof, the pub allegations only deepened the mystery, leaving more questions than answers in their wake. In the years that followed Claudia Lawrence's disappearance, the unanswered calls became a poignant symbol of her father's enduring grief. Peter Lawrence often found himself dialing Claudia's number, knowing full well that she wouldn't pick up. Each call went straight to voicemail, but the sound of her voice greeting him provided a fleeting, bittersweet comfort. "I just wanted to hear her," Peter admitted in interviews, his pain palpable. For him, the calls were a way to hold onto her presence in a world that had been cruelly emptied of her. Yet each unanswered ring also served as a haunting reminder of how little progress had been made in the case. The voicemail messages were eventually erased by the service provider, a devastating blow to Peter, who felt as though another piece of Claudia had been taken from him. The unanswered calls became a ritual of loss, an aching echo of the silence that now defined her absence. For her family and friends, the lack of closure was unbearable. The unanswered calls weren't just Peter's, they were the calls of an entire community left waiting for answers that never came. As years passed, advancements in forensic science brought hope to other cold cases. But for Claudia Lawrence, these breakthroughs offered little solace. Despite renewed efforts to examine the evidence, investigators faced an overwhelming obstacle: the lack of a clear crime scene. Claudia's home, the last place she was confirmed to have been, bore no signs of a struggle or forced entry. There was no physical evidence, no blood, no DNA, no fibers that pointed to foul play. Her phone, keys, and potential belongings that might have been with her at the time of her disappearance had never been recovered, leaving detectives with little to analyze. In an attempt to uncover new leads, police re-examined CCTV footage from the area, hoping that advancements in technology could enhance images or reveal missed details. However, the results were inconclusive. Searches of her home and the surrounding countryside were revisited with modern techniques, but nothing emerged. The lack of evidence made Claudia's case uniquely challenging. Investigators were left speculating whether the perpetrator had been extraordinarily careful or whether Claudia's disappearance had truly occurred without a trace. This forensic void was a painful reminder of how elusive the truth could be. Forensic science, often seen as the cornerstone of modern investigations, could only do so much without tangible evidence. And in Claudia's case, the absence of such evidence became an enduring testament to the mystery that continued to confound detectives and devastate her family. By 2014, 5 long years had passed since Claudia Lawrence's disappearance. Despite extensive investigations and countless appeals for information, the case remained unsolved. But then, a chilling decision was made. Claudia's case was officially reclassified as a suspected murder. This shift in classification marked a significant change in how authorities approached the investigation. For her family, it was both a devastating blow and a grim acknowledgement of what they had long feared: Claudia was unlikely to be found alive. The reclassification brought renewed focus to the case. A new team of investigators was assigned, and the cold case unit began meticulously reviewing every detail of the original investigation. Detectives re-interviewed witnesses, re-examined CCTV footage, and revisited Claudia's relationships and social connections. Public appeals were relaunched, with authorities offering a reward for information that could lead to an arrest. Yet the grim reality loomed over every effort. The passage of time had eroded evidence, faded memories, and lessened the likelihood of a breakthrough. While the shift to suspected murder breathed new life into the investigation, it also served as a stark reminder of how elusive the truth had become. For Claudia's family, the reclassification was another chapter in their agonizing search for answers. Peter Lawrence, ever the tireless advocate for his daughter, expressed cautious hope that the renewed focus might finally yield results. But as the weeks turned into months, it became clear that even this new direction might not be enough to unravel the mystery of Claudia's disappearance. As investigators continued to piece together the puzzle of Claudia Lawrence's disappearance, a number of haunting theories began to emerge. These possibilities, though speculative, painted disturbing pictures of what might have happened to the missing chef. One of the most prominent theories suggested that Claudia had been abducted while walking to work in the early hours of March 19th. This idea gained traction due to her established routine. She often left home before dawn, walking alone through quiet streets to reach the university kitchens. Could someone have been watching her, waiting for the perfect opportunity to strike under the cover of darkness? Another theory focused on the possibility that Claudia had fallen victim to someone she trusted. Her relationships, particularly those kept private, were closely examined. Was it possible that a romantic partner or an acquaintance had lured her out of her home that night? If so, what motive could they have had? Jealousy? Rage? A crime of passion gone too far? Others speculated that Claudia's disappearance might have been the work of a stranger, a random act of violence, or a calculated abduction by someone with no prior connection to her. This theory, while chilling, also seemed plausible given the lack of evidence tying anyone close to Claudia to her vanishing. Each theory carried its own disturbing implications, and none brought the comfort of closure. Instead, they added to the growing unease surrounding the case, serving as constant reminders of how easily a person's life could be stolen away. For Claudia's loved ones, these theories were an unbearable source of torment. Each one felt like a door to a nightmare, yet none of them provided the answers they so desperately needed. The haunting possibilities of what might have happened to Claudia Lawrence lingered in the minds of all who followed her story, a grim testament to the enduring enigma of her fate. More than a decade has passed since Claudia Lawrence was last seen walking home from her shift at the University of York. In all that time, her disappearance has remained one of the United Kingdom's most haunting and perplexing mysteries. Despite exhaustive investigations, relentless media attention, and repeated public appeals, the case is defined by a chilling void, the absence of a single, crucial piece of the puzzle: the truth. Every effort to uncover what happened to Claudia has been met with frustration. Witness testimonies, forensic examinations, and countless hours of police work have failed to provide the breakthrough that could finally bring answers. The reclassification of her case as a suspected murder only underscored the grim reality Claudia likely met with foul play. Yet without evidence, even this remains a theory. Her family, friends, and the nation at large continue to grapple with the uncertainty. How could someone vanish so completely, leaving no definitive trace behind? Claudia's case is a stark reminder of how a single missing piece, a vital clue, a credible witness, or a moment of clarity can hold the key to unraveling even the most intricate of mysteries. Who took Claudia Lawrence and why? Was her disappearance tied to the secrets she kept about her personal life, or was it a random act of violence that struck at the most unexpected moment? Could the answer lie in the shadowy gaps of her final hours, or was it hidden in plain sight all along? These questions continue to haunt the investigation, casting a long shadow over Heworth Road and the lives of all who knew her. Theories abound. Was she targeted by someone she trusted, stalked by a stranger, or did an encounter on her early morning walk to work turn deadly? The lack of answers invites speculation, with every theory as unnerving as the next. Yet none provide the solace of closure for Claudia's family, nor do they offer the definitive resolution that investigators have sought for years. Until the truth is uncovered, Claudia's story remains a stark and chilling reminder of how someone can vanish without a trace. Her case lingers in the public consciousness, a mystery that refuses to fade, and a call to action for those who might still hold the missing pieces of the puzzle. As viewers reflect on her story, they are left with the same haunting questions. What really happened to Claudia Lawrence? And will her family ever receive the answers they so desperately seek?